by the way, huge shout out for you. Our last episode, you called out Lad McConkey having more receptions, and we did a water bet than Marvin Harrison. And then the next, who was it that had the same exact call out and bold take?
Field Yates actually did it.
Yeah, Field Yates said he's going to lead all rookies just like you did in receptions. And then that got me a little bit like, I trust your opinion, but I definitely trust his.
Okay.
Welcome into Live Good, Die Nasty. We got another episode for y'all this week, and we are going to have a fun discussion on this one. This one is real fun because we have what we change. We have full control. What would we change about fantasy football scoring settings, things like that, after we cover a couple questions that have come in. And then we're going to close it out. And the main big chunk of today's episode is all about different league types. So a couple different ones that interest us that we want to talk about that are just fun. It's not a dynasty related. It's just fantasy football and the love for it and the unique things that people have come up with and what our thoughts are on it. But either way, I'm Arlen Love, your host, co-host, Nate. How you doing, Nate?
Doing good, man. Excited to get into this. A lot to cover today for sure. So I know we got a lot going on, but as always, I want you to make sure you're checking us out, liking, subscribing, and commenting and engaging with us out there in the YouTube world. We love hearing from y'all. It's where we kind of built together all the questions, some of the content that we put together today. But bro, before we do anything else, like I didn't hear it in the agenda that we put together because this is so hot off the press, but Arlen, you pulled off another one of your ridiculous trades this week in our own Dynasty League, buying your way into yet another first round pick, meaning that between the two of us, we own half of the first round picks now. And it drives me nuts that it happened. The top half, yeah. It's ridiculous how much we own in there. But, dude, walk me through this. How'd you pull this off? What is this?
All right, so I mean, we talked about it earlier, and I FaceTime you so that I could read it off to you before you saw it last night. It stemmed from the fact that I played with an idea. By the way, huge shout out for you. Our last episode, you called out Lad McConkey having more receptions, and we did a water bet than Marvin Harrison. And then the next day, I heard you sent me this clip from, who was it that had the same exact call out and bold take?
Field Yates actually did it.
Yeah, Field Yates said he's going to lead all rookies just like you did in receptions. And then that got me a little bit like, I trust your opinion, but I definitely trust his.
Okay.
And I was like, wait a second, this might not be so outlandish. So I was toying with the idea with you that I would maybe, if you took who I want to take, Odunze, and he's not there for me, I might just pivot and get Lad McConkey angry because you are angry at me with Odunze, and then it spiraled of like, wait, maybe you'll let somebody else drop down there. So I want to come up and get some scraps in the first round. That's a long explanation, but that was the dynamic and driving force between most of what we do in fantasy football. The trade itself is, I did overpay. It was the 201, the 301, Trey Palmer, and Malik Davis was just a throw in to move up, I guess, those 6 spots to that 106 spot. So now it's the 102, 101, 103, 106.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about now that we got those. Do you plan on holding on to that 6th pick, or knowing you, because if I understand anything about how you operate in the world, everything is an asset, right? So are you planning on holding that, or what are we doing with that 106?
So we talked about last episode about how when you have too many, you tend to get cute, and it might lower its value itself. So I am afraid of that because I did see this automatic luxury when I was doing some mock drafts with it, where I was like, oh, I could, if I just had the 106 or even just 101, 106, I'm taking best wide receiver available most likely. But then I start getting cute, like maybe it could be Caleb, maybe it could be Bowers. And then I was looking at Brooks, and that's what scared me.
Yep.
Where I was starting to look at Brooks and thinking about, I don't want to use my first round pick on him. and I think I maybe would. So to protect myself, I might try to trade out of that and lock in something that's also more secure. But I was willing to combine all these assets to move up because my general strategy is by likelihood of success. And 106 versus 201, even though I might even get the same guy in situations, or a possibility of it. It's that certainty of moving up that far that I can really get somebody who's most likely going to hit compared to someone at 201.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to break in there, and I think we can dig into this in a future episode for sure. Just the value of draft picks, how this year is different than other years, and what that looks like. But man, shout out to you. You pulled off another one. Literally 1 week, barely more than after I pulled off what I thought was going to be the best trade of the offseason to get into the 102 spot. So we'll see how it plays out. 106 is that scary middle of the first round where you don't know if value matches talent there, but we'll find out what happens. All right. But anyway, sorry to interrupt the flow. Let's jump back into this thing.
Yeah, man. The first thing, we wanted to hit some fantasy football questions, and one of the big pieces that I keep seeing pop up. And by the way, thank you for everyone for throwing those questions into our videos in the comments. We had some full roster breakdown questions in there, and a couple of them, which was really fun to engage with. But under the radar sophomores, wide receivers to target, players that possibility of breaking out in that second year is large with wide receivers. If you have low draft picks in let's redraft, for example, that's when you can really stack up on these and hopefully they hit, because there's a huge correlation with second year wide receivers that proved a little bit that there's something there in that first year to be able to possibly get to bet on for that second year. So who are you looking at in Dynasty as a second year breakout candidate?
There's a couple that I was going through when I was just doing some research and jumping into these second year guys, right? There's all the obvious folks that are out there, but three people that came to mind, and I'll dig into a couple of them for me, were Trey Palmer with the Buccaneers, Michael Wilson over in Arizona, and Demario Douglas in New England. And I know, like, whoa, why are we talking about a New England guy? But we'll get into that in a second. But these guys didn't have the greatest of years last year, or maybe they had a mediocre years and didn't profile huge, but I think they have great opportunity in year two. Trey Palmer specifically, we don't know what's going to happen with Chris Godwin at this point right now, right?
Yeah.
We know Mike Evans is going to be there for sure. And ageless wonder Mike Evans, who's breaking records for how many thousand yard years he's gonna have, but and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. But I think Trey Palmer across the way, especially if Chris Godwin doesn't end up being there, or one of the two guys gets injured, which has happened year over year with these guys, I think Trey Palmer easily slides into that and can easily pop off coming into year two, right? The other guy I was thinking of is Michael Wilson. Going into year two over there with Arizona, of course. We're going to talk about Marvin Harrison here in a couple minutes, but they still need a solid number two guy out there, and I think Michael Wilson's going to be the guy, and he's got an opportunity to do better than he did last year. No more Hollywood Brown, no more other folks eating into that. So
Zay Jones did get added to that team, though, so I think that's one to consider there as a possible number two.
Who's that? Just kidding. Mr. Reliable Zay Jones. No, I mean, sure, I did forget about Zay Jones, but yeah, he's going to be a solid guy for sure, and he's always Mr. Reliable for Trey Lawrence, so that does add an additional factor. But hey, why not? And then in New England, I called out Demario Douglas because I was trying to just dig into these number two guys and make a case for them, and who might possibly have a pop off or might have a path to it anyway. And someone's got to catch passes out there. They did just draft someone that has number one talent in Jalen Polk, I believe. But I think he's solid. Behind Jalen Polk, when he comes into himself as a number one talent and that breaks into the NFL, I think everyone else there is a number three wide receiver. So someone's going to come in and got to grab those twos, and I think Demario Douglas has not shown all that he is and might have a chance at it. But anyway, those are my three picks. What other breakout candidates do you think there are, though?
I agree with the ones that you laid out there. I think Michael Wilson, it's going to be interesting if he's able to carve out significant with Zay Jones. Because I to be honest, I forgot that Zay Jones got added, and yesterday I was looking back at this and seeing that with that addition of him.
Yeah.
But either way, one of them I've been actually trying to get back from an inactive user of ours for a while because I had thrown him in almost in a cavalier way. Dante being Wicks. I had him last year. I was really excited about him. I think I didn't really, I didn't really value him the way that I should have, and I kind of threw him into a trade to just push it over the edge and let him go. And then it was the next day or two I was really looking into it and had seller's remorse, I guess. I've been trying to buy him back. There's a strong possibility that he becomes the number 2 behind Reed, and then I think there's just too much. There's a crowded wide receiver core there.
Yeah.
But I think that is it Watson, right? Watson on there, is that? Am I remember it, or am I saying the wrong? Yeah, Christian Watson.
Yeah.
He's got injuries. He's got injury history. He seems to be banged up quite a bit all the time. And I think that Jaden Reed is the alpha in that, and Wicks is a possibility of moving above everybody else in there.
Okay.
So I think that's my number 1 like sleeper breakout. And then Trey Palmer, I think, is probably what I'm looking for with him is that he breaks out to show that he can be the future versus fully taking over a spot and becoming dominant this year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I mean, I guess the next thing we should really talk about is in this year's class, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. We've talked about the other rookie wide receivers with like Odunze, Neighbors. And now I'm glad we actually talked about this trade situation where both of us are 4-6. It's right after all those guys are gone in a 1 QB. Lad McConkey is one that I'm a huge believer of. I think you are as well. Thomas Jr. Like who's next after these guys, and how often and how many times a week does it change for you?
Every time we discuss this, right? Lad McConkey's up there, and I think he's getting closer and closer to where I think he's kind of the absolute number 4, no questions asked guy. Like, but I'm by now a Lad McConkey apologist, and I've talked about him pretty much every time we've had a conversation about wide receivers. So beyond that, beyond him, beyond Brian Thomas, I think I go back and forth between Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy, right? These guys obviously are in top 10 caliber, but who's going to have the better opportunity, right? They've got Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes thrown to them, so they got elite quarterbacks thrown to them. So just because of the unknown, right? Rashee Rice is still at OTAs right now. Like he's there, he's participating. We don't know what's going to happen otherwise. Like we don't know how that situation's going to play itself out. I think Xavier Worthy, obviously with his speed, he's showing off extreme talent with that, and hopefully catching passes from Patrick Mahomes, put him in the right places. I think that's got a lot of opportunity, but I think he's more of a boom bust candidate than Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman's just a big dude, and is going to be a lot of fun to watch on and off the field. So just rooting for him a little bit there too. And I think he's got a more solid floor because I think it's going to go your boy Kincaid and then your boy Samuel and Keon Coleman. I think are going to kind of battle it out for that number 2. Yeah, eat up most of the stuff there. But Patrick Mahomes just has a tendency to be able to get it around to whoever's out there. So I think Keon Coleman, I think he will be your better jump ball player in the end zone. He'll get more touchdowns. I think he'll get more touchdowns than Xavier Worthy, even though Xavier Worthy is the guy going out long wise. I think Keon Coleman becomes a real red zone threat alongside Kincaid, and I think that's going to be kind of the tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, I think that I keep getting torn between those two. I think Worthy could be. I think Worthy's value goes way up. Obviously it would with a suspension that's significant for Rice. Let's say it's half the season, which is like there's some rumors that it might be half the season. But then I think those rumors happened before this photographer dropped charges like yesterday or the day before. I'm sure there was like a off the book settlement, but I don't know how that's going to play out. And I think the problem is in redraft, it absolutely affects that ranking. In Dynasty, it still does because it's all about opportunity. Does Worthy have the opportunity to show what he's capable of right away? Does a team have a need for him to step up right away? And then if he grabs a hold of it, there's a larger chance that he keeps it or at least is more even with Rice than what he would have been. Coleman, I think that there's solidified partners there. I think Curtis Samuels, he's a veteran. He's good. He's going to be used. James Cook is a pass catcher. Kincaid has a rapport already. And then Coleman comes in, and there's already questions about his abilities right off the bat. So I think they're both boom bust. I think what would push over the edge is a larger suspension, and I would go the Worthy route. But between those guys and then someone like Brian Thomas Jr., are they far and away above them, or are they all kind of in that same boat for you?
I think we're going to call them in a similar tier, if we want to call this whole section like tier 2A and 2B, right? Like, I think you can make an argument for any of them. I think there's riskier plays amongst them. I think Ladd and Brian Thomas, and you could almost argue that Ladd is making his way into 1B versus 2A, but you can make arguments for any of them. But I think there's a safer bet with Ladd and Brian Thomas than you're going to have with Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy. But if they, no matter at the end of the year, their rankings as far as fantasy points go, I wouldn't be surprised by any order between the four of them.
So let's take a look. You got Worthy, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas. Where in there do you take your first non-wide receiver?
Roster construction aside, like if I only had one pick in the...
Yeah, let's say that the strategy is going for best available and...
Okay. I think you can make an argument for 6 because there's risks with a couple of those guys. So that if you chose to go Caleb Williams above Xavier Worthy because you were really worried about the boom bust thing, or maybe you don't think Rice is going to have the suspension, or it's not going to be that long, or it ends up being 2 games depending on when your draft is, and you know that already, and you want to go Caleb Williams, like, that's fair. I don't think, you mentioned this earlier, so I just wanted to reiterate and double down on it. Jonathan Brooks does not belong in the first round. To me, like, I don't think he's
in fantasy.
Really, I don't think he's gonna get drafted in the first round. In a lot of leagues, he might in ours because there's some very running back needy teams in our league.
I think he's worth going in the right past the middle of the first and on.
Okay.
Just because he has the opportunity there to be the guy, and like I like Trey Benson more than Brooks, but Benson is not immediately the guy year one, and that really matters with a running back. If you can find a way to get even good talent, not great, to be the possible number one with such a short window of success, like you kind of have to have them hit almost right away to make it worth drafting in the first round.
I'm really struggling to understand your hatred towards Chuba Hubbard. I just wanted to fully understand that, like, not a bum. It's not Miles Sanders. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I think the facial expressions alone made the point for me.
So I'm gonna need to take a quick pause. Apparently, there's a lizard loose running around my house, and it's making a lot of noise downstairs.
I just want you to know that I don't know what's going on. You can fill me in later, but this will be a short.
Well, I'm gonna disappear, so
go catch that alligator.
Apparently, there was a very large reptile running around our house. I was able to wrangle him into a bucket and not harm any animals during this recording, but have him make his way to outside. No, it was we had our sliding door open to cool down the house, and apparently it came in from the outside. So
how big are we talking?
Like 9 inches.
What?
Not crazy.
9 inches?
Like head to tail. It was like a long tail, like half of the 9 inches tail. So like 4.5 inches. Not a giant, not too crazy, but bigger than my wife wanted to deal with.
That's what she said.
Enjoy your brew and brew over there, buddy.
Sorry. Yeah, I think as we go along and closer to it, it's only a couple weeks away, our draft. but I think it's going to change every day. And there's a lot of pieces of news that I'm waiting to hear. And OTAs just started, so all of this can change every single week. That being said, though, I want to jump into these god powers we might have if we could change anything about fantasy football.
So we've been playing for long enough that there has always been these little things that bug us about how fantasy works. And I think evolution is always important to ensure that this game is still enjoyable with how real football keeps changing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the idea here, what we want to discuss is what are some potential changes we would have around scoring, maybe some of the rules, some things that are out there with fantasy football at large. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is our quarterback scoring system. Because we think about our quarterbacks that are awesome today. If we just break down the draft class, right? When we're analyzing these 5 or 6 quarterbacks, let's exclude Michael Penix for obvious reasons. But actually, no, let's not exclude him. If we were before pre-drafted, we're looking at these guys, we're looking at measurables around, of course, their accuracy and their ability to be on the field. But when we think about God mode and what puts these guys over the top, it's usually they're rushing because of how rushing is scored. They're scored as if they were running backs, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so obviously your running quarterbacks we're valuing way higher than our pocket passer quarterbacks who, are playing the position that we're scoring the way that it was initially designed to be scored, right? So how would we possibly alleviate that? I'm trying to think of ways that we would clean that up.
Yeah, I'm on board with you because I think there's a balance between trying to match fantasy with football where you can, where it supports and it's fun, and the fact that a player like Justin Fields is they said goodbye to. He's on the bench, and he was awesome for fantasy.
And fantasy darling for a couple seasons. Yeah,
right, and he did great there. But the fact that he is a rushing quarterback is why he's a fantasy darling. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there at all. So I think that the scoring needs to change, where if your quarterback is passing and rushing, those points should be the same, 0.25 in most formats for passing yardage, and it should be the same when they're rushing. But rushing is a setting for scoring, and it's not for any individual position. And I think it needs to be an option to have an individual position that would get that. So quarterback rushing should be 0.25. And I think it is a good idea. As much as I love having that rushing, that cheat code in fantasy football with that quarterback, I think that it is a shame that a Joe Burrow or even a CJ Stroud, who's right now the hotness, he blew up, but he will have a bad season. Herbert had a bad season, but he didn't have that bad of a season. It's just if he doesn't blow up the world with his throwing, then he's just not going to be a top 10 guy or a top 5 guy. In reality, any franchise would trade for these guys in a heartbeat. Right now in this year's draft, we've got rookie Jaden Daniels. The only reason Caleb Williams is ranked above him is that he is in an unprecedented situation with talent surrounding him where he can throw the ball anywhere without looking, and someone amazing is there to catch it. If that was not the case, then Jaden Daniels would be the top quarterback in this draft, and he almost is, and for a lot of people, he still is.
Yeah, agreed. Yep. Yeah. And you think about that, and it's crazy to break down because you're right. Justin Herbert, talking about Chargers again. But with Justin Herbert, he didn't have a great back half of the season because he's throwing to guys like Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, and Donald Parham, right? If they're dropping passes, no matter how awesome he is at what he's supposed to do in the pocket, and if they're running away from him because he's been injured the last couple of years, he's not scoring points for you, but he's still Justin friggin' Herbert. And because of the situation that he's in right now, he's not going to get rewarded in the same way.
Right.
So I agree. Yeah. So good call out. I like that. I like that idea. How about the quarterback scoring? What do you think about that? Because when, as a rusher, you score 6 points in a lot of leagues, but a lot of leagues, passing touchdown only counts for 4. Would you
Yeah, I think that's
restructure
how we
that at
have it in
all?
ours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've played in a couple of leagues that passing touchdowns are worth 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's fair. I think that it has to be taken into account with all other settings in your league.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of just blanketed going 4 or 6. You have to, like, especially with this other setting, if you're able to adjust that, then we have to really look at the passing touchdown, because we don't want, like, this is where it breaks from reality and fantasy. Quarterback is
Mm-hmm.
the most important position in sports, and it's the most important, absolutely, of course, for NFL. But we don't want it to outshine everything, because everybody would trade away in real life football. Everybody would trade away anybody on their team, and multiple of them that are amazing at every position, for a star quarterback. They do it all the time in drafts, and just the prospect of it. So we don't want it to get to that point. That's where we have control in fantasy football to make it competitive. We're trying to even out and make sure that there's a good ratio of need and power of a position, combined with its scarcity, and combined with how many you have to play. Like, you have to create this balance. So it can't match exactly. It needs to be
Yeah.
significant. But I think that I've found that I prefer 4-point touchdown if I was able to get this scoring situation figured out with the rushing.
Yeah.
Since I'm not, I've played in a couple, and I do like, because it gives a little bit more to the passing quarterback. I like the 6 quarterback passing touchdown, or 6 point for the passing touchdown.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that would be an awesome rule to be able to adjust. This next one though is like the one that keeps me up at night. Some games, like this next one is one for me that I think, like, if we could get this fixed, um, my heart would feel so much
I'm
better
with you.
at the end of days, right? Like, so pass interference. When you're looking at pass interference during a game and you're watching it and you're stoked for your team because you're watching the Chargers, you're watching the Browns, whatever, um, and they gain 50 yards on a pass interference call, and you're like, sweet, that really helps my team out, right? But then you're sitting there and you're like, man, I've got Justin Herbert, and none of those 25 yards
Yep.
counted for my
They're
quarterback,
all
or 50
disappeared.
yards, right? They're just gone. They don't exist, right? And the team still got that great gain, but your wide receiver didn't get it, and it was total. And it breaks my heart when it's like a totally catchable pass or something that was
Mm-hmm.
right in their hands, but got broken up in pass interference or whatever.
I'll do even one more. Like, it's a catchable, but it's also forced by the wide receiver, which is a skill set. Like, I feel like that needs to be rewarded, and all that yardage just poof goes and disappears. This one I'm
Right.
really passionate about. When we started this dynasty, I don't know if you remember, but when we started the dynasty league, I said in it as a heads up to everybody, year one, said if they ever add this setting,
Yep.
it's immediately toggled on at the start of the next season.
Yep.
It's no questions asked, no voting, because I would turn it on right now if it was available. That's what the setting would be. So when it is available, just know that that's getting turned on. And Sleepers actually played with this a couple times. I've heard them say it. And they said it a couple times, and they haven't said it for like a year and a half or 2 years or something. And I'm really hoping that they figure it out. And I don't know if it's a app thing, or does the NFL not track that stat? And that might be the issue. But I feel that it shouldn't be yardage, to be clear. It should not be yardage equal to the catch. An equivalent that might make sense is a wide receiver catching the ball to make math easier, let's say it's 100 yards. That would be 10 points for the wide receiver. And for
Right.
throwing, it would be 2.5, right?
Yeah.
So I think that should be 2.5 for the wide receiver. And then I don't know about the quarterback. Maybe they get something, or maybe they get a point or a half a point or something like that. Or maybe each player gets like a 0.25 or 0.5. There's something there, though, because it is a skill set, and those points do vanish, and then no one gets them, and you just move
Yeah.
forward. And I don't think that's the right call.
Yeah, I agree. It's something to benefit that because you're right. That's a good call out. Like how many times that passive interference has happened because the wide receiver instigated um, a behavior that drew contact. So
It might
I
mix
love
with
that
this
call out.
next one though really well. Of like, what if it's a half point for getting because you get a first down?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's true because this whole idea, this we go back and forth, and I've played in leagues that are full PPR. I've played in points that are half point PPR, um, and always feels like it's penalizing somebody there. So the idea here is that we would introduce a half point PPR, but gives additional points for those first downs. So in those terms, though, what would that look like? How would those points be awarded? How much is a first down worth in your eyes? Like, how would that break
I
down?
think it's making that half point whole again because I do like
Yeah.
the full point PPR. That's my preference. But after kind of exploring these ideas of what we would change, I've really come to the point where now I want it to be, and in some of our leagues we can change this. I want it to be half point for a catch and half point for a first down. Most catches are made whole again because you also got the first down. What it rewards is a running back that got the first down. These or a wide receiver that got the first down. It Either way, if you can get over that mark, that threshold, you move the
Hmm.
chains. In football, that is what matters. So again, it's getting
Right.
closer to what matters in football, but I felt like a full point PPR plus a half point for getting a first down, it felt like it was stacking too much up.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think it's a good compromise to again make that full point whole again, but also reward the hard work that's important to the game that other players might get.
Spoken like such a purist, this guy. Um, love it. Awesome. And you know, you bring it up, and I think one of the things that nerds of fantasy football like to do is explore these different types and structures, different types of point systems, and all of that. But even beyond that, beyond just different point structures and how what we would change the game, there's also different structures behind leagues in general and at
Mm,
large. So
yeah.
let's jump into that here, and I'll hand that back over to you.
Oh, I've been waiting for this conversation. So, with full permission from everybody, I'm going to cut this section about our first one and send it as marketing to everyone I know to join up. But it is, you're right. It's important to be able to kind of it's not important, it's fun to explore other ways. We love Dynasty. It quickly became my favorite version of fantasy football once I started. I
Yep.
love Keeper. I like Redraft. Dynasty is really fun, but I'm also like, I have a passion for fantasy football as a whole more than anything else. So this one, oof, we're doing it this year. We're gonna make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vampire League. So let me down how this Vampire League works. But it seems like a lot of fun. I've never done it personally, and some of you might already know it. And if there's a different type of league format, I'll say it in the beginning, I'll say it at the end, throw it in the comments because I just like to nerd out on this stuff and I want to
Yeah.
hear what you all are interested in, some cool stuff that you guys are looking at. But Vampire League is all about one team. I don't know how it's chosen. I think it's league dependent. If I could volunteer to be the vampire, there's nothing else that I would love more than being able to be the vampire. This player, this manager within the league, does not draft. Everybody else drafts, and they have to draft almost in a best ball format. And if you're unfamiliar with best ball, you draft and you don't make moves. You just what you have is what you have for that whole year, and it takes the best of what. This doesn't take the best of what you have. You just have to draft knowing that you're not going to be able to use the waiver wire all year. So draft happens. No draft for the vampire. So everybody's team's a little bit better because you have that missing team. And then the vampire gets to go into the waiver wires and they build their team off of the waiver wire. And at first you start weak and you have to kind of be savvy with the waiver wire. You have to be really good with starting your lineups in the correct way and playing those matchups. And if you beat the team that you are going up against that week as the vampire, then you get to, I think it's take any player from that opponent's starting lineup. So the opponent can bench a good player, which this is a piece that I didn't even realize when I first went into it, but they can bench a player to protect them, but risk losing that play, like risk losing against the vampire because they didn't start their best player. So that vampire can steal that player. It goes onto their roster now. And then I think the vampire gets to choose any player from their team to return as the other end of that trade. And then as the vampire goes, obviously, they get stronger and stronger. They're taking the best starting players from every single team. I think an alternative to this would be, there is a possibility that I have to look at this and think about it more, but maybe the rule would be anybody from the roster so that bye-week players count as well, or maybe bye-week players in general count towards that starting roster to make it a little bit more fair. But that just sounds fun. If you can get to the end as the Vampire League, as the vampire, then you're in such a strong position to make it through and win the championship. But you kind of have to start pretty early with some luck, and then you can ride that wave, because the playoffs themselves work in the same manner as it does now. If you get in, you have the same structure going forward, and you have to survive every week. What are your thoughts on the Vampire League? I'm excited about it.
Yeah, there's so much strategy from both sides of the house, right? Like when you think about if you're the non-vampire and you're in the draft, you have to more consider your handcuffs, right? Like you're taking up roster spots with handcuffs, because if one of your starters gets injured, you can't go to the waiver wire and go get that guy. And now, if you didn't pick up the handcuff, that handcuff might be sitting there for the vampire to go grab, and now they have essentially the number one running back for whatever team your starter went down on, right? So you're as a drafter, you're taking up spots with some backups because you have to safeguard your position. Mm-hmm. So it's crazy to think about in that regard. From the what you just called out, thing I was thinking about is that if I'm going up against the vampire team and I see that I have a potential to lose that game, do I strategically bench one of my starters and just throw the game away, knowing that like if I keep that player for another day, I get to keep them for when I play the other teams in the league. So it's a lot of fun to think about. I think you would have a lot of fun as the vampire. I think I would stress the heck out doing it, but going into the year. But yeah, you're kind of hoping for injuries early so that you can figure out who's that guy that comes on and I can go pick up, because you're not winning games week 1 and 2, right? You're having to build into a stronger end of the season, but I think there's a lot of potential for fun there. And it's easier in some ways for the rest of the league, because just like you said, you draft like it's best ball. You also kind of play like it's best ball, because casual, if you're not chasing the waiver wires and you're not making trades, then you're just kind of chilling, right? You're just setting your lineup, and unless there's a bye week, you're just chilling. There's nothing really to
like in your dynasty. For at least our roster sizes are so huge that for the most part everybody has 40 players, and so it's like in your dynasty where it's for the most part who you're going to start, and but these other players can't. I don't think that they can make they might be able to make trades. I didn't see anything that says they can't.
I've never seen anything against that, but
and I do have to make a correction, because I said that you would give that player who you would drop, but you would actually just drop them, so they're available as a vampire. If you're dropping someone, they're available later for you, because the waiver wire is just yours. So I think you have like a 300 player roster if you're the vampire, but it's just all the rejects. And then you have to build up and build up and build up, but that's always available for you. So that is an aspect I haven't thought about of you can drop someone without fear as the vampire and kind of stream through, like, I'll pick him up next week if I need him. I'm not playing him this week. No one else is going to grab him because I own the waiver wire.
So in that format, then, when the vampire steals from another team, that team just has an open roster spot. They don't get a player in return.
Yeah, because you only play once or twice, right? So you're only losing one or two people for the whole year. So and maybe, and I have to look at what other people do. Maybe that the roster spot is one or two more, but then that would also disadvantage the vampire.
The
So I'm
vampire.
not really
Yep.
sure if it's just like, well, better not lose.
Yeah.
And there is a huge advantage, as you could imagine, for being the team that plays the vampire first.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
weeks playing the vampire, you must be like, I almost want to say like it should be randomized every single week, the schedule. Who are you going to play next? And just making sure that no one plays it more than twice.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot. It seems like there's a lot of manual work that goes into this. I know that there are some sites that support the Vampire League structure, but I don't. Yeah, I can't even begin to think of the
I will do
algorithms that have to put into
everything
place to make that work.
to make it
You'll
happen.
do everything?
I'll do everything
All right.
to make it happen.
I'm like imagining the crazy Excel spreadsheets that we'll have working out.
Well, we got a couple more. I want to call out one piece that it was a league type that we were going to speak to, but I think we're just going to take an element of it and speak to it. But if there's other elements that you want to kind of shout out that we should have, let us know. But this is, I like this element of an Empire League because it can be added to any league. The big piece of an Empire League is that you're taking the pot for that year is half of the dues versus the full amount, and then that other half that you didn't have towards these winners, however you structure it, goes into a stacking pot, cascading spot of like until somebody wins, I think 2 times, and then they get the whole thing. So if it's 20 years before somebody hits that 2 years in a row, now unlike Nate, who started off our dynasty with the belt behind him as the first 2 years he won. Unlike that situation, it's usually many, many years before anyone ever does 2 in a row. So by the time you're really getting it, basically you have to really trust the commissioner holding the money. But
so that wouldn't be you. Got it.
But you could apply this to any league format, and I think it'd be a really cool just twist.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome.
What do you got, Nate?
Yeah, I want to jump into something that I think would be really interesting, and this is another year-long league redraft structure called an elimination league. The Elimination League. And with this league, you have to change up your strategy a little bit because it's not about winning your game, right? So the way that this works, everyone drafts as normal at the beginning of the year, but every week, someone in the league, so it's got to be 12 or 13, or you can even do like a 16-team league, depending, and just structure the timing so that it ends at the end of the year. But basically what happens is every week, the team that scores the lowest amount of points is eliminated from the league. So they're out. They're done.
The lowest amount of the entire league gets kicked out of the league.
Right. Yeah. So it's not about the head-to-head matchups or anything like that. It's just a fun league where all the teams draft and we're just trying to score, not score the least amount of points. So every week you've got a team that gets eliminated. And when that team gets eliminated, their players drop into the waiver wire. And then you can do whether it's I'm losing my words, but whether it's a waiver wire situation or however you want to do your waivers,
priority versus fab.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I could not think of priority.
We're out of season right now. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah, we're so out of season right now. Whether it's a priority order or and figure out how that works, or if it's a fab situation, everyone's eligible to go grab those players. And then every single week, teams are getting slightly stronger, but also one team is getting eliminated, and it ends at the end of the season. And depending on how many teams you have, it ends when there's only one team left, or if we get to week 17 and there's 3 or 4 teams left, depending on how big your league is, then you would go into a traditional playoff.
Have you ever done this?
But I haven't. I've only read and done some reading on this, so it's really interesting to see, like, because when you're going into your draft, now you're drafting not to lose games, so you're essentially drafting for floor, right? You don't want people that are going to zero out on you. You don't want folks that
or like late breakouts for some, like a good safe and then a couple late breakouts.
Right.
You know what I really like about this and the Vampire League is I think the reason I like these unique league types is it introduces and forces you to try out different strategies. And one of my favorite pastimes with my buddy is I play Rocket League. And there's these like little side I know, bear with me, it'll make sense. There's these side games and side types that aren't the main one. And we always talk
Right.
about like when we're playing them, like what are we practicing here? Like what about the main game is this letting us or forcing us to practice? And I feel like that these anytime you're forcing these new strategies because it forces you to do it, I guess, in a different way than you've done it, and then you can maybe bring some of that skill set into the main one. I like playing around with the different strategies of fantasy football.
Yeah, because then you think differently about players, right? And you have to think about rosters, and you think about what different variables can impact a player throughout the year, and stuff like this makes you think about more than just uh, 3 weeks out, or thinks about the whole season, or thinks about injury history. Like brings all of that into play where you might not think about that in a traditional redraft league.
Yeah, yeah. This
The,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say there's one more that we were gonna talk about, and this is your brainchild, so I want you to talk about this one. So go for it.
You know what? Saying this, I completely forgot that we were covering this piece, and I'm so excited to talk about it. So I, I spoke at an event like work related, not this, and I was at the table with I forgot what company this man owns. He's the CEO of a fantasy football company, and we were going back and forth, and I explained this one to him, and we nerded out for a while about its possibilities. Relegation League. I'm a big MLS fan. I love my Timbers. And I think that one of the things that are missing from the MLS that I understand why we don't have it, but it's a shame. Relegation. Of American sports in general, relegation is it brings a totally different element to sports. And if you're not familiar, relegation, let's look at European and other leagues as well, but let's look at the European League. We have the Premier League, which is the premier. It's the top one. And then right below you have champions and a league, and then you have several leagues under that. And if you are one of the bottom, each level is structured a little differently. But if you're one of the bottom ones of a league, you get bumped down to that lower league. And if you're at the top of that lower league, you get bumped up to the top one. And I've wanted to do a relegation, and we started the first relegation league last year. But we only have one league, and we're gonna, as we have a wait list, that will be our second league, and it can grow exponentially. However many people want to join and be a part of this. But if you're one of the top leagues, you bump up our top teams of the league. You bump up to that next tier, unless you're already in that next tier. And if you're at one of the lower couple, maybe it's like a whole division. We can kind of play around with that, but it would move down to that lower league. What it naturally does is it creates the same thing in European football is like it creates this place for people who take it seriously, who are crazies, who are sickos like us. And then it creates a space at the bottom for people who love fantasy football more casually. And I find that a lot of times in leagues that I'm in, they get so much hate. The people who don't take it as seriously, and they don't answer trades as fast, or maybe they just they like nicknames and they like the names of players, and that's what they draft. There's like all these little things, right? But like we shouldn't not have them in fantasy football, like because they're not all in already. So it naturally creates a safe place almost especially after a couple of seasons. Safe place for just trying it out, not sure if you're into it. Waitlist until you're at the new league, and you'll quickly jump up if you're a serious player to that new one, or whatever version that is, and then a highly competitive after many years, a highly competitive league. I think that could be done with multiple different ones as long as the scoring format is the same, and then you could have a shared main trophy that's in the middle. You have some structure that connects everybody together, and everybody can be added as a manager that's not assigned to a team to every league to kind of observe. So it can create what I'm most interested in fantasy football, a community past just that one league. I am really holding back here of my nerd passion I don't want to scare everyone off, but I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, and there's so many possibilities, right? Because this could really open it up to, you know, folks that want to just try their hand at fantasy. Like this,
Mhm.
this really gives it that safe space, gives it a comfortable spot for those first time fantasy guys that have just waited way too long to get into fantasy. Maybe they're really into football but never actually played fantasy before. So you got all of those folks, and then out there, if you're interested, I didn't talk to Arlen about this at all, but you know, we have a need for more and more people to join these leagues. So if you're ever interested, hit us up in the comments. Let us know. Um, we'll find you
Okay,
and get you in there somehow.
let's pause right here before you invite a bunch of randos. No. What, I think this is an interesting question, though. What makes a league mate valuable to you into the league itself? What strengthens a league? What kind of manager and who are you looking for when you are recruiting managers? My rule for Dynasty was everybody who's coming into the league, I had to have played with them in a league before. Because not just me or somebody connected within the Dynasty, like it has to be like you vouch for this person because they do what are these things?
All right, so breaking down the most important things out of a league mate, when we're thinking about folks that join a league. One, you can't be someone that just drafts and walks away and never looks at your league again, right? So someone that's going to, at bare minimum, engage weekly into their team. So that's kind of the number one component for me. Someone that's going to be engaging weekly with their actual team and with the league. I'm not saying jump into chats. I'm not saying respond to all the trades. I'm just saying someone's setting their lineup,
Very minimum.
responds to trades, and right. At a bare minimum, someone that sets up their lineup every week, right? They're in there, the lineup is set, and they're actively, pulling out their injured players, things like that. So that's number one, and kind of the primary main qualifier. Two, the other component is that I don't, and I guess you wouldn't know this unless you've played in the league with this person before, but I'm not a fan of league wreckers, people that come in just to cause chaos. I've run into this a few times as I've played over the years where someone just goes in and makes very heavily lopsided trades and will take on bad players just to mess with folks. It looks like collusion, but it's not. They purposefully lose to certain teams. What's that?
The saboteur.
Yeah. Someone that's going to lose to certain teams but go hard against others and create chaos. It's hard to measure. So that's why I said you can't really know that until you play in a league with someone. But I guess that's the other component. But other than that, I'm pretty easy going. What are some other rules you have?
There's rules and hopes. So
okay,
I think the rules are the number one is setting. You're right, setting the lineup. I think a very close second and almost tied exactly to it is waiver wire. Setting lineup and waiver wire. I would love if you live draft. You don't have to be active in trades because that's not my business.
Yeah.
But you have to be active in responding is my next tier. So beyond just the minimum, I think that's really important in competitive leagues, especially. This is why I like the idea of a relegation league because there's some more casual and that you don't want to be putting in that kind of effort in. I think waiver wires are a standard that you should have. If you're doing fantasy football, I think that is a right above minimum. And then finding the trades, and then just overall, like, you don't have to be commenting on things, but I think what really makes a league is a collective conversation. Whether it's a thumbs up on something, but I think that a lot of times we have these break off texts and communications, and I've been a big advocate of, and why I actually moved all the leagues that I have to Sleepers. It puts the chat right in everyone's easily accessible, like right there. I think that's really big. You don't have to chat, but I hate when I find that there's all these side chats about, and what happens honestly, and I'm an iPhone user, but a lot of like Android people just get cut out of league chats because everyone wants to do it in iMessage. It's like we have an app for that. Let's like have that conversation because it can drive every conversation. You're in the app already, have the conversation in the app.
Yep.
That's my high end. Like, that's what I want from you is at my high end. I don't care if you're good at fantasy football. I prefer you not be. No, I do. I love the competition. I invite competitive people. I like it. I think like anybody who is really passionate about something, good people make you better. So I do like that. But I just like the involvement over everything.
Yeah. And I will say that one thing I think that sets the two of us apart from other folks that maybe we play with or have engaged with, I think we genuinely, even though we will joke about wanting to have players in there that aren't that great, genuinely we want people to do better.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we are about people learning the game and making it more popular and getting people in there that enjoy what they're doing. And like fantasy football sucks if your team sucks and you don't know what to do about that.
Can I correct my answer real quick? Above anything, because I want it on the record. Above any of like this, I mean, setting your lineup is definitely there, but even as a baseline before that is don't be rude. This one is really.
I was walking us there, bro.
Were you? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna hand it back over because it's. Don't be rude. It is a game.
Yeah, and that's where I was walking us, man. Like we are about people doing well in the league. Of course, if you're not great at it, that helps us and benefits our team, sure. But we want people to grow. So like, I don't want people to ever be scared of joining the chat or asking a question or doing something they think is right because it's what they believe in.
That was way more classy
for their team or their player, right?
Yeah.
So
well done. I should have.
The reality is like, I don't want people in the league being toxic, right? Like for whatever reason, we've got strong opinions out there. We're very passionate. This is a very passionate sport, and I'm going to call it a sport, fantasy football, and right, we're athletes 100%. Love that. I hope that's coined.
It's not from me.
The big thing for me is that there isn't toxic personalities in there where we're putting each other down, calling each other names for no reason. There's one thing where we can joke back and forth and give each other a hard time because of some of our ridiculous takes or whatever. But when it becomes personal or name calling, like there's no need for that. We're trying to grow together and figure this out. First 100%. Ain't no room for that. So that's just where I stand on that. I think on a social standpoint, it'd probably be up there as a number one rule. But yeah, as far as fantasy league mates, be active, be there, and don't be a jerk. And I think we're good.
There you go. You heard it from Nate. Don't be a. Thank you for
Dadgummit.
Fill in the blank.
Dadgummit.
Thank you guys for popping in to another episode. This is always real fun. And if you have, again, any other league types that you are interested in, fantasy rules that you are interested, there's a couple of episodes that we are kind of toying with of like I think Nate mentioned, I teased it a little bit, but design your perfect league. What's your perfect league? What settings that can you not find when you're trying to design it? What league types are you interested in trying out, or something that we didn't mention that's unique that we should check out? We'd love to do more of these discussions because I think over Dynasty, over Redraft, Keeper, anything, we just love fantasy football. But that's all for us this week, and we'll see y'all next week.